Hello everyone, we will get into a deep dive in location-based games. I am Juan de the CEO of Posibillian Tech. Posibillian Tech is a game startup founded in 2015, devoted especially in developing location-based games. We have 22 people right now. We launched 2 games in the past, and we are about to launch a 3rd game on the next year. So we have plenty of experience in this type of games. Our first game was Fhacktions, which is a location-based game in which you are a hacker. You try to hack hotspots in the real world, and by doing that, conquer the world. Our next game is Coin Hunt World. It's a work-for-hire project for a US company, and it's a crypto game. And our 3rd game is Romance Go, which is a location-based dating simulator that is being developed internally in our company. We've been accelerated in Finland by Level Up Accelerator in 2017. And we've been also accelerated by Google in their Indie Games Accelerator program in Singapore in 2019. So we've been working with mentors, with very experienced people and developers from all over the world, and we learned a lot of things that we want to share with you. Obviously, when someone thinks about location-based games, probably Pokemon Go is the first thing that comes to mind, and Ingress, that is a game from the same company, Niantic. At least developers know that there were a lot of other games in the past that were also not as famous as Pokemon Go, but well known, like Shadow Cities, that was created in Finland in 2011, I believe. And then Harry Potter from Niantic, Walking Dead or World, Jurassic World Alive, maybe are the other most successful location-based games that were launched during the past few years. But as I said, probably Pokemon Go is the only one that had the big success expected for a game like this. And we know that Pokemon Go had some specific things that make it that famous, and a lot of people think that probably there is no other game in the field that can compete or will ever be able to compete in the location-based space. A lot of people, when saw the success of Pokemon Go, started to develop location-based games because they thought that the Pokemon Go players might want to switch to their new game. And most of the time, that wasn't the case. We had some Pokemon Go players that switched to Fhacktions because it was a very complex and different experience. But most of the people who play Pokemon Go, they only play Pokemon Go. They don't play other type of location-based games. Okay, so Shadow Cities might have been the first big game with a interesting investment behind, and in the end, it was shut down. And the question is, Pokemon Go is the best or it will be ever the most relevant game in the field? And we know that Pokemon Go has a big fandom, so that's a big thing, bigger than any of the other games in the location-based space. The IP from Pokemon Go really match the gameplay, so it makes sense to play a location-based game searching for Pokemon. And any other IP that has some kind of treasure hunt might also have the same opportunity, but probably the fandom is not as big as Pokemon. Pokemon Go is AR friendly, which is a good thing. It appealed a broad audience, small children, old people, everyone wanted to play Pokemon Go. It was the first location-based experience for a lot of players. So a lot of location-based players tend to get tired of this type of game after a while. But as most of people played for the first time a location-based game, Pokemon Go was a good thing for them. It was very viral, and it has the Japanese players that we know. They are very committed. They half of the income from Pokemon Go came from Japan. So that is a thing that we need to have in mind. And how is the location-based gameplay? How is the core loop of a location-based game? Obviously, you move around to find points of interest, POIs. You travel to those POIs. You interact with the POIs in some way, maybe with a mini game or something like that. And then you walk around to trigger some game events. That last thing is not true for all the games or the location-based games. But it was an idea that was proposed in several games, obviously used in Pokemon Go. As you walk around, you gather resources, or you can hatch your eggs or that kind of things. Because you want people to move around. That's the idea of a location-based game, at least a while ago. Now it's not all the games do that. It's just to get to a place, do something, and then move to another place. And some games doesn't care if you walk around, if you go in a car, or you do any other stuff. But why people play these type of games? Well, if you ask them, they will say that they enjoy outdoors, and it's a good way to walk around in outdoors in a park, and it's a good way to do some exercise and have fun. Obviously, if you are a fan of the IP, like I said, in Pokemon Go, it has a big fandom, so they want to play every Pokemon game. Commuters play this type of games because they are on the move and they want to do stuff that is related with the places that they are passing by. This is also good to know places around. Maybe you're in a new city, you are doing some tourism, or you want to know better your neighborhood. This type of games are a good way to do that. And the community-driven activities are a big thing. If you can gather a lot of people in some places and do some cooperative or competitive activities, that is very interesting. So those are the main reasons because that the players choose to share when they are asked about it. And I have some other big questions about the location-based games. The first one that we need to think about is, these are casual or are hardcore games? And some people will say, no, it's a casual game. You just open it wherever you are, and you do some stuff for a minute, and then you close the game. But the truth is, moving around is a hardcore activity. If you have the option to just sit in a couch and play a game in your TV or your phone, why will you bother to move around the city? That is a hardcore activity, even if the game is casual. So for me, every location-based game by itself is hardcore. So when we design this type of game, we need to think that we are already having a hardcore activity that is moving around. So the game must not be too complex, because you are increasing exponentially the complexity of the game and the difficulty of being able to play it. And that is something that we learned in the hard way with Fhacktions, that I will share some more about it later. But Fhacktions was a very hardcore game, and moving around was even more hardcore. So in the end, we kept a very loyal base, very hardcore base, but it was very difficult to get new casual players into the game. The other big question is better to have a well-known IP or original IP? Probably everyone will think that the first one is the best way to go, because most of the successful games are based on IPs. Probably Fhacktions is the most successful original IP on the field. We have more than 500,000 installs currently with the game, but that is a very small install base if we compare with the other games. So yeah, probably it's better to go with a very well-known IP. But maybe in some places or in some ways, an original IP can do better, and we will share some experience on that, because our 3 games are based on original IPs. Obviously, we have the dependency on location-based activities to advance in the game. Like I said, that makes it very hardcore. So sometimes we need to think about if that might be the case, or we might have a lot of activities that are not tied to a location, so players can play at home or at the office or wherever they are without bothering to moving a lot around. And moving around can give you a bonus, but you can do a lot of stuff without getting out. And that might be counterintuitive, but it might work, so you must think about it. And the other question is, there's room for comparing location-based games, or there's no room at all? And one of the things that we saw is that it's not like a FPS where I like this FPS, and if comes another out, I will try it and see if better than the one I playing, and probably that doesn't happen in the field. It's like MOBA, when someone thinks, okay, I will try to appeal all of League of Legends players to my new MOBA game, and it's very difficult because a lot of players are not playing the type of game. They play LOL and only LOL. So I think that there's enough room for everyone to develop new games, but we need to think carefully that probably players from other location games will not be interested in our game, and we will need to get new players. Okay, which ones are the good things about location-based games that appeal the players and that make them interesting? Obviously, you can tie quests to real locations that make it fun. In Coin Hunt World, it's a trivia game with cryptocurrency prices, and we put questions about the places that you are visiting. So that makes fun to be at the place and try to and visit new places. Obviously, you can do exercise. We have a lot of players telling us that they are losing weight thanks to the lot of walking that they are doing, and that improves the psychological well-being. Now we are getting off the pandemic, and people want to get out and, I don't know, think about other things than problems. Improve navigation and cartographical skills. People learn how to move in a map, and that's a good thing. You can do a lot of outdoor activities while you're playing the game. You decrease the sedentary behavior, increase knowledge of your surroundings. And a very good thing is that you can increase your social interaction, because most of the games are multiplayers, and you can cooperate with other people to solve some quest, or you can compete with other people to conquer a place. So in the end, you are meeting new people. which might be dangerous, and we need to think about a lot about that. The committed players are really invested, so players who play this type of game play a lot and for a long time, so that is very good. And you have a lot of emergent gameplay. If the game is a multiplayer game and you let the players to build structures or create user-generated content, then a lot of emergent play can come up, and that is really good. And you have fan fiction that can happen on any game, but in our games we have a lot of players who wrote stories, so it was very, very interesting. And there are, when you are a video game developers, obviously you think about KPIs and in the free game market, in the free-to-play market. And there are two KPIs that are very good on location-based games. The first one is the high engagement. So we saw the average playing time was like 50 minutes in our games. We have people playing for 4, 5, 6 hours a day, and in the end the average is 50 minutes. So that's a lot for a mobile game. And the other thing is the long-term retention. Some games have a very good short-term retention and then they fall off. But in our games, we have a long-term retention. So our short-term retention is not that good, but players who stayed more than a week, they tend to stay months or years playing our games. In some other location-based games, is the opposite. There's a very good short-term retention, but people get tired of moving around and then stop playing after a while. So that are two very interesting KPIs to think about. And if we think about the monetization opportunities, there are some unique opportunities out there with location-based games. I believe the first one, and the reason because of why we created Posibillian Tech, was that we thought that bringing players to physical locations to play a game can have a lot of marketing possibilities. So we can bring people. We worked with some fast food chains, and players wanted to conquer those places because if they conquer the place, they will receive a free meal. So a lot of people were battling because it was a battle to conquer the place to get that meal, and these fast food places were filled with players, and that was a very, very nice experience. You can have some promotions, coupons, a lot of things if players visit the places, or they can gather resources or that type of activities. So that's a very unique marketing strategy because no other game can do that. Obviously, there are other ways, that more traditional ways to earn money with a location-based game. You can ease some activities with a payment. You can have a very good core loop and progression, and probably RPG elements that can be fastened with a payment, and you can improve your multiplayer competitivity or your self-representation, skins. There's a lot of ways to earn money, or unlocking new characters. There are a lot of things that you can do that are more traditional in the sense of a mobile game. But like I said, bringing players to physical locations is a difference. But we have a lot of issues when we design a location-based game, and I will talk about some complexities. And this probably is the biggest part of the conference. First, you have the problem of balancing gameplay in big cities and the countryside, and there are two big problems there. First is the player density, the number of players per square kilometer or whatever. and the other one is the density of POIs. So what usually happens is that cities are crowded. There are too many players, and it's very difficult in a multiplayer game. It's very difficult for new players not to be beaten up by other players. They need to join a factions that can defend them, and all the places are taken, and you need to battle for every place in the games that you want to conquer a place, or any multiplayer activity. And on the countryside, you have the contrary. There are few POIs, and you need to move far away to get a new POI because those are scarce. And there are little opponents to play against, so you are alone. And in our game Fhacktions, you were able to conquer a whole city, but there were no other players to take it back from you, so it gets boring. So this balance between the big cities and countryside are very hard, because the game is designed to work well in one of the two realms. And usually it's hard to have a good balance between the two. The other thing to keep in mind is the distance to interact with the POIs. So how far away you can be from a POI to interact with it. I don't know, in a game where you need to get a creature like Pokemon Go, you need to be very nearby to do it. So a few meters, or you will not be able to do it. In a war themed game, you might be, 100 meters, kilometer, and you can shot a bullet or a bomb or whatever. So it will depend of the type of game. But if you designed this game to have some marketing activities, you need people to be on the spot to be able to do those marketing activities. So you need to restrict the distance to a short distance to be able to interact. And those bring other problems, that GPS is not perfect. So sometimes you are on the place, but you are a few meters away and you cannot interact. And that type of problems can start to happen. Or you can have a POI, but the POI is inside a company. The company closes at night, or a shop or whatever, and you are outside in the front door, but you are not able to interact. So you start having those type of problems if the distance is too short. We usually work with distances of 50 meters, 20 meters, depending on the activity, or 100 meters, depending on the activity. But no more than that, but no less than that also. The other thing to think about is the field of view distance. If you will be able to see how long, probably you will choose, between 500 meters or a kilometer, a mile, something like that. Because you don't want to clutter your screen with a lot of small things, because a mile is very far away and you will have a lot of POIs in the middle. Or you can do, like in this image, something very nearby, like 100 meters. But in that case, people will not be able to know what is around, because in this type of game, usually you're not able to move the map around, because you are in the middle of the map always, and you need to move so the map can move with you. So if the field of view is very small, you will not be able to detect what is around you, and probably you need to see in every direction, some squares to know where is better to move. So that is a hard thing to define, and it will depend a lot on the type of game. And the other problem is the location of the POIs. Obviously, you can have a gameplay that is tied to real locations. So if you go to a hospital, you can get healed. But what happens if there are no hospitals around in your neighborhood? You will not be able to heal never. at least you go to the city center or main street or wherever. So it's not as easy as use the real word for the locations. And the truth is, probably it will never work good if you use real locations for your gameplay. You can use some, but you probably will need to fake some other locations to have a good balance in the map. And you can create your own POIs, etc. And the other problem, like I explained before, with the POIs is the interaction distance, and some map services like OpenStreetMap put the POIs inside buildings, not in front of the building, which is good for a map application, but not for a game application, because in most game application, it must be enough to be on the front door to be able to interact. And that is a big problem, because you need to curate the content by yourself, because the OpenStreetMap information is like that. And we had a lot of problems with that with our first game, that was Fhacktions. That is kind of different with Google Maps. And we were very happy using the Google Maps for Gaming API. But the sad thing is that the past week they shut down the project. And so it's not a good idea to keep using for a long time. They will still have it up for one more year, but in the end, you will need to change it. So for me, it's a good idea to switch back again to OpenStreetMap with probably Mapbox or another provider. The other problem, like I said, in the game design field, is that these type of games are hardcore for most of the players. So getting out and moving around is a hardcore activity. So any location-based game is a hardcore game. True, you can do a very casual game on top of that, but you must know that a lot of players will not want or will not be able to move around. And that will hamper the experience, and you need to think how to solve that situation. Like I said, moving around is hard, it's expensive, time-consuming, and there are some ages, like children, that cannot move around without their parents, so they are stuck probably in their homes. And a lot of people is most of their time at home or at the office, and the only time that they have to move around is when they're commuting. That is good in Japan. That's why Pokemon Go is so big, because they use trains all the time. But in the United States, most of people prefer to use a car, and we don't want to people having accidents or playing while driving. So commuting is not a good thing in some countries. And some other type of countries, like our country, if you get your expensive phone in a bus, you will probably get mugged. So you cannot play while in the bus. And the other thing is, okay, we can reduce the scope, and we can have a scope of a neighborhood and give players everything they can do on their own neighborhood. So they don't need to move around their city. They can just go to a nearby park and that type of things. Yes, but it's not as easy, because you need to curate by yourself, by hand, the content. And as an indie company like ours, we needed to have some automatic POI fillings. So it was very hard for us to do that. We needed to come with some ideas that can come by an algorithm. And also we have the COVID pandemic that showed that people sometimes, even if they want, they are not able to get out their homes. So we need to have in mind that that is a big problem for this type of games. The other thing is, as this is a hardcore game, you need to do all the other activities easy, short, casual, So that is why Pokemon Go worked well, because you move around, but then when you need to catch a Pokemon, you just swipe and that's it. As the main core loop of the game that was chasing Pokemons. We did a very strange thing with Fhacktions, and where you have battles, so you move around and you have a battle, and our battles were long, and people probably doesn't have the time to open and start playing like 20 minutes or 10 minutes in front of a store. So we found out later when the game was already launched, and we did some tweaking over that. But in the end, battles still had a duration of like 3 minutes, and it was more than the time that a lot of people had. So the game became very hardcore. People were happy, players were happy, the ones that had the time to do that, but most of the players didn't have that time. So it was not a good idea. So any multiplayer game need to know that the interactions need to be short, but at the same time, that is not easy, because if it's a multiplayer game, one of the sides are attacking or doing something, and the other side will receive a push notification. They need to get into the game. They need to defend themselves. So it will take a while to solve even if the combat is very easy or the type of activity to solve the situation is very easy, you will need some minutes to do that. So competitive multiplayer in this type of games is probably not the best thing to do, but is engaging for the players. If it's cooperative, it's different, because probably people will be together at a spot, and they will be able to do something all together, but very fast. So for cooperative games, it's easier to solve this problem. The other problem, obviously, is the exposure to physical interaction with the real world. We have a virtual world, we see everything through the screen, but the real world is out there and you are in there, and you need to think about the safeness. What happens if a player gets to an unsafe area in different ways? It might be a dangerous place, as a construction site. It might be I don't know, a place where you can get mugged because it's a dangerous street or neighborhood. You can have a lot of problems. You can fall into a pit, whatever. And you as a designer doesn't know, because you have this automatic POI field from an algorithm. Again, we were very happy with the system that Google developed, because it was very safe. Places are curated places and very safe. But sadly, as it is shutting down, we need to go back to OpenStreetMap or Google Map, but not with the curation part. And that if we make an automatic POI field, is very dangerous. It's unpredictable, so you don't know what will happen when the players goes there. It might be a bad time of the day. It might be a bad moment. You might have, I don't know, strike at the street. You don't know what will happen, so it's unpredictable. And also you have the weather. You have rain. It might be cold, hot. I was looking at the GDC presentation of Shadow Cities a while ago, when I was preparing this presentation, because I wanted to see how things changed from 2011, 10 years from now, and how other things were the same as that time. And they were from Finland, and they have players in Finland, but I stayed in Finland. I said that I was accelerated there by the government, and for me it was so cold. So I had only like 3 months that I was able to get outside and enjoy, and the rest of the time I just wanted to be inside buildings. So location-based games have the problem that it's too hot or too cold. you will have less people playing in some countries. In Paraguay, it's the opposite. Here it's too hot, and going outside at certain times, we have like 40 degrees Celsius. It's really hot, and you don't want to play with that sun. So we had that kind of problems also. And the other problem is the speed controls on walking. You might not allow players to play if they are moving too fast, if they're in a car. But some games are designed to be played while walking, and some others doesn't ask you to walk. You need just to find interesting places. That is what happens with our two new games, with Coin Hunt World and Romance Go. You just need to go to a place to do something, and that's it. And walking around is not something that is interesting, because you can do a lot of POIs doing a walk. So you will enjoy that, but it's not mandatory. But you need to control that also. Then we have technical limitations. So location-based games have technical limitations. Some limitations were solved in the past few years, but some others exist. First one, what happens with a place that has no good information of their surroundings? There are streets that are not in the map. There are not good POI fields. What will you do? It will be just an empty place. And if someone lives around, they will not be able to play. Then the information might be outdated. So you might go to a hospital to heal, but the hospital is not there anymore. Or there's a new hospital, but there's no information about it in the map. Then you have the gameplay depending on the type of places. Like I said, it might work or not work well, especially in outside big cities. Then I already explained that the selection of good POIs. If you do an algorithm, it must be very good, because else the POI field will not feel right, or there will be a lot of places, a lot of POIs in some areas, in too few in others. So in the end, you will need to do some manual tweaking that is expensive. If you are trying to Fhacktions was available in 170 countries. We are not able to do a manual check in every country and every city. So some games do a manual fill for the most relevant cities or places. We do that with Coin Hunt. Every time we open a new country, we fill by hand some places or POIs in the main cities, and then after that we do an automatic fill with an algorithm. How will you deal with unsafe locations? That is information that is not on the map data and the POI data. So it's very difficult for you to solve that. And if something happens, you might get sued by a player. And even if it's not your fault, because you have no control over it. What will happen with unreachable location? There are places in the map that are POIs, but in fact, they are not reachable. It might be inside, I don't know, a military facility. It might be an island that is in a lake that nobody can go there if it's not swimming or something like that. And those are hard to pinpoint. And the other thing is, if you will use real POIs in real time, or you will fill in beforehand those POIs in a database, and you can do both. But like I said, probably if you will want to curate the POIs, you will need to have a database, and do not fill it on real time by some API like the Google one or OpenStreetMap. Then we have the problem of the first-time user experience. Maybe you say, okay, this city doesn't have a lot of POIs, but as the player moves around, we'll find it. Yeah, but the player just will install the game while he's probably at home. They will open, the map will be empty with nothing around, or asking you to move like 500 yards to the first POI, that player probably will not get there. They will just uninstall the game before having the experience. In Fhacktions, what we did is that when you created a new profile, you entered the game, and if there was nothing to nearby enough to be able to interact, we created a POI around 50 yards of the player. So from home, the player will be able to have a first interaction without moving around. And after that, well, he will need to look for new POIs, but at least it will have one nearby, and that gets into the database forever. So next time he opens the game or anyone opens around the game, it will find a place. But that POI field is I don't know, filled by luck. We just put someone in a place that we think that it might be interesting, but we don't really know what exists there, because there's no shops, no hospital, nothing interesting nearby. So it's dangerous to do that. And the other thing is you cannot put the place in the house of the player, because that will start showing homes of our players, and that is dangerous. That is private information. So we need to put a random place around that is not at the home of the player, but is near enough to be able to interact with it. And that's a very tricky thing. And then we have the worldwide live ops. That is a big deal, because you want to do some activities, and those activities probably will be tied to real locations and POIs. And if you want to do, I don't know, a Halloween quest where you go to certain POIs, get a special item, you forge a cauldron, and with the cauldron you can do a spell, and then you will earn something. You need in every city of the world to do a manual POI field for that, and that is impossible. Only very, very big companies might be able to do something like that for big cities around the globe, but we cannot do that. So live ops is hampered by that difficulty. The other thing is the user-generated content. Is very interesting to let users to create things around, so they can improve POI, they can create their own structures in the map, and that kind of things. And we did that in Fhacktions, we do that in Confront World, and that works very, very well. But it has some issues. First thing, in a big city, all the players will want to create their HQ, their place, whatever, and you will start having thousands of POIs in a small place, and that is not good for the game because it will be overcrowded. But if we let one player to do that and we don't let other players to do the same thing, it's kind of unfair. So you need to think about it. And the other thing is dangerous locations. A player can go to a dangerous location or on purpose put some kind of structure there, and that is not a good thing. So you need to check all the user-generated content and approve it before letting get into the game. Then at the same time, some players can lure players to dangerous places, and it's the same case of the previous one. You need to check every place that they create something. And we obviously have security and privacy issues. And what happens in Fhacktion is we let people to create their HQ, and they can earn a lot of things having the HQ, but people put the HQ at home, and other players were able to see their HQ and know which player was the owner of the HQ, and that's a very, very high security risk. So in the end, we changed that, and you were not able to see who was the owner of an HQ, or we moved around the HQ to not to be on the home of the players. But there are a lot of privacy issues there. Okay, the other thing is multiplayer, because a lot of these games are designed to be multiplayer, but multiplayer location-based game has a lot of problems. First, the critical mass. If you don't have a critical mass in every city where there are players will get bored, and it's very hard to have a critical mass. It's not the same of a new game. If you wanted to play, I don't know, a traditional game, any multiplayer game, if you have all over the world 10 players, they will be able to play against each other, even if they are from different countries. But in a location-based game, you need all the players to have other players around, and that is very, very difficult, very hardcore. If for indies who do not have money to do big marketing efforts, is way more difficult. So one thing you can do is focus only on some big cities, but a lot of players will not be able to play the game, or have a slow rollout. Just have a rollout in one country, in some cities, and then start growing in more countries or cities as you are getting a critical mass. But still, it's really hard. The other problem is multiplayer games can get a lot of players at the same location at the same time. In Fhacktions, we had that. We have some contests where players need to conquer some players, some places from our sponsors. And our sponsors were overwhelmed by, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 players getting in and playing in their stores. Because several factions were trying to get in. So you need to think about it. And those people will meet each other face to face. And that might be a security issue. We hope that all of our players are good people, but you never know. And that might bring some problems there. The other problem is the map persistence. If everyone needs to see everything at the same place, that's a problem, because if players can create their own things, or there are, even if there are single player dungeons, probably I will tell my friends that a single player dungeon or a creature is there, and the others will want to go there. And if they don't find it, it will find strange. So you need to have persistence. You might have solo players who doesn't want to play multiplayer, but still they enjoy the game. So you need to give activities so they can enjoy the game anyway. We have the privacy concerns, as I told. We have the children's security. Children who might move around the neighborhood or might be in the nearby park. They can be drawn to a dangerous place or around dangerous people. So you need to think about it. And we have the cooperative and competitive behaviors. The cooperative is that you bring people together, and sometimes it's difficult to coordinate activities with friends. You know that, like I said, this is a hardcore game in the end, and it's more hardcore if you need to cooperate with other players, because you need to have time at the same time to play the game with other people or friends, but you also need to go to the same place. So that's even worse. And the competitive behavior, we have the problem of balancing very hardcore player with casual players. That in other type of game is not that hard, because you can create leagues or tiers or different ways of joining together same type of players or same level. But in the location-based space, you cannot do that. Maybe your neighbor is level 50 and you are level 1, and that's a fact. And we did some things to try to very high level players not to bother with low level players, so they don't earn anything if they attack them or that kind of things. But still, they do that just because they enjoy that. So it's very difficult to balance that, because you are tied to the location. and that is something unsolvable. So a way to solve that is that the multiplayer part is not tied to an RPG progression, but at the same time the RPG progression is important to keep the players interested and playing a lot. So that's a hard thing. And the other problem is the gaming fatigue. Multiplayer competitive games cause that fatigue because you don't want to play all the time, but you need to do because you will fell short and the other players will beat you. And you need to be all the time watching over the stuff you conquered in the real world and trying not to lose it, and that brings fatigue. And probably some players will just stop playing. While if there's a solution for that, they might continue playing. But it will depend on the game design of the game. Then we have the hardware and technology limitations. First, the map services that have POI quality and interactions, and sometimes the POI quality is not as good. Like I said, the Google Maps for gaming was really good, but now that we are losing that, going back to OpenStreetMap or the traditional Google Maps is not the same, and we need to deal with that. And then we have the POI availability. Like I said, some places are crowded with interesting POIs, but some places there's just nothing around in miles. And how would you solve that problem? Then we have the roads and trail quality. All of the maps have problems. Here in my country, a lot of the streets are not very well documented, even on Google Maps. So that's a problem. Then the GPS availability. You need to have GPS working all the time. And there are times where GPS is not working good, the signal is not good. And if you're indoors, probably you will not have a good signal. And that's a problem because the experience will not be as smooth as it should be. Then we have the rendering technologies. Like I said, the Google Maps for gaming was really good. What we were using in our 2 new projects, that one. And now we are forced to change back. We will probably use Mapbox right now with OpenStreetMap information. But there's not a lot of technologies to use. And you need to have that in mind. Then we have data connection issues. Most of the players are, like say, are multiplayer games. So you need to be connected all the time. And to gather the map data and POI, you also need a connection. So that's a big problem. In places where the connections are not good, the game might not work at all. Or strange behavior might happen, like your avatar might jump from one place to the other, or that type of problems. We worked a lot in Fhacktions. We were able to have a multiplayer experience of 10 people at the same time in a battle, and the map and everything on 3G. But we need to work on the low level TCP protocol to be able to do that. And the other problem is these games are power intensive. They drain the battery really fast because GPS drain the battery very fast, and these games tend to have the screen open and working all the time also. So hardcore players will have probably a battery attached to the phone to be able to play, but that is not good for casual players, and that is a problem. Okay, and the other problems that we have is cheating and game-breaking behaviors. In location-based game, cheating is way worse than any other type of game. Here, GPS spoofing makes the spoofers too powerful, or they gather too many resources, or they level up too fast, and they are able to attack and defend all the time, any place in the world. So cheating is a big problem, and you can do a lot of things to try to keep cheaters away, but it's not easy. In our game, Coin Hot World is really difficult, as it's a crypto game, and people can earn real world currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum or that type of currencies. So a lot of cheaters try to cheat the game to get money. So it's really, really hard, and we do a lot of things to avoid that. And we can control it up to a certain point, but we know that some cheaters might get away. So the first problem is the GPS spoofing. And there's a lot of ways to do GPS spoofing. You can just put a location and go there, but you can have programmed movement. So you will try to show the game like you are walking slowly from one place to the other, and it's very difficult to find cheaters that do that. We have our ways that I cannot share because I don't want the cheaters to know how we are dealing with that. But there's a way to do it. But we have several engineers working on systems to do that. You can block routed phones, and some customers and players will ask you to allow routed phones, but no. You can have some GPS cheating controls. There's software who detects the GPS spoofing software. It's not perfect, but it might help. Anti-tampering controls. Androids have the safety net that helps in a certain way to do that. But even on iOS, that it was thought that it was hard to use a spoofer. It's not like that, because there are some hardware spoofers that get connected to the phone, and that is impossible to detect. Or probably they use an emulator. There's a lot of ways to spoof. So this is a big problem that you will have to deal with. And the other problem is driving and playing, and you need to keep out the players of the game while they're driving. And that's an important thing, because you might be liable of legal consequences, even if the player is the one who does that. Then we have the legal issues, privacy, as you are probably gathering and even using location of the player when they create structures in the world that have some problems, and you need the players to know that they are sharing the location for this and that. That's very important. Data protection issues, because you will probably gather location information as probably to keep cheaters away. You need to store location to do some analysis and use AI to understand if players are cheating or not. And you will use that when they create locations. You will store that in a database. So that's very important. Privacy protection. Where the data is stored, that is a secure place. What happens if there's an accident when they're playing? You need to have your terms, condition, and all legal things prepare for that. What happens if minors play? What happens if you have a bad POI location in a dangerous location, a protected location, a closed location? You need a way so people can tell you that, and you can move POIs away. And like I said, you need a big team to work on a location-based game. We are a small team. We are only 22 people right now. We are an indie developer, so for us, it was very hard to do that. But you must know that small teams will not be able to develop this type of games. You need front-end developers, back-end developers, and there's a lot of back-end involved. You need to integrate with a lot of different platforms, the maps platform, POI field, and some others, multiplayer platforms, etc. You need to have probably 3D art, because most of the maps are 3D and the objects are 3D. And you need to develop mini games, and you need to give technical support. So a mid-sized team is the less thing you will need to do a game, and even a big one might be relevant. Okay, we are running out of time, and I had some anecdotes to tell, so I will try to be very, very fast. In Fhacktions, it was a MOBA with location-based. and real-time battles. So you can imagine how complex that was. It was really, is a really interesting game. We have a lot of players right now. It's not as successful right now as in the past, but still we have a very strong player base on Asia. But the problem is it was too hardcore, and we changed the game design in a lot of ways to do it less hardcore, but in the end it's a battle. So we have time constraint. The battles needed to be short. We send push notifications so people can enter to defend. We had several factions, not only two, and that was a very good decision. A lot of players had only 2 or 3 factions. That's not good. When players can create their own factions, that helps a lot to get in the game and fought for their own faction. At the start, we needed to have all the players in the place to attack and defend the place. Then only the attackers needed to be there. Then only one attacker needed to be there, and everyone else can get inside remotely when an attack happened. And then we have bots that can defend and help the attackers to balance the battles and to have a more fun battle. So we did a lot of changes on that. The other problem we had was the RPG progression. As players get powerful, they were very unbeatable in their neighborhood. So we need to change a lot of things to prevent that. And we have places that were able to be attacked only by low-level characters and other players only by high-level characters. So we kind of separated and split those, but it was not a perfect solution. And the other problem was solo players. And we created dungeons, and we got bots to help them so they can play by themselves. Coin Hack World, like I said, is a crypto game. So we have the problem of cheaters and how to give crypto, and people needed to do a lot of activities to get the crypto. So in Coin Hack World, you move around because you want to get the crypto. And when you get a POI, you need to answer questions from trivias that are not difficult, but not easy. So you need to move around and answer questions to receive the crypto. And it's a very good match. Location-based game with crypto is a very good match because people want to exercise and also get money while doing that. And for the cheaters, we have a lot of things, but one of the things we have is the photo quest. That is a quest that can appear on any vault that when you want to solve a quest, and you need to take a photo of the place at that time, showing your thumb. And if you don't do that, you get banned. So, and you never know when that will happen. So if you're cheating, probably in a day or 2 or 3, but someday you will receive the photo quest. You will not be able to hack that, and you will lose everything that you earned. And then on the back of the game, we have a lot of controls, AI, a lot of things to detect behavior that is strange or is not regular, etc. And also we have the pro mode. That is a very interesting thing. You can select if you want to become a pro or you're a casual player, and the question and everything is different, and the casual is easier, but you receive less crypto, and the pro is harder, but you want to receive more crypto. The last one, Romance Go, is very casual. Location are just an excuse to meet people around you, virtual people, and then most of the activities you will do it without location. Just some quests and treasures are done on the map, but the idea of Romance Go is you go to a party, you open the game, there's some people there, you match those people, and then the rest of the game is not really, it's not mandatory to do activities on the map. But if you want to get items or gifts for these virtual characters, you might need to do a walk around. Okay, and with that, I'm finishing. I tried to tell the most I was able in the little time that I had, but I can tell that developing location-based games is really complex. Players love the mechanics, some of the mechanics, maybe not all of them, and they get really engaged on that. It can be too casual or too hardcore depending on player's type, and it's very difficult to balance that. Game design needs to be very, very well thought, because if you fail there, your game will be unplayable, and it's not easy to change once it's out. Cheating breaks the game more than in any other genre, and it's hard to change core mechanics once launched. And players will be very pissed off if you change core mechanics once the game is out. So you need to think thoughtfully on the game design part. Okay, thanks a lot. I am very happy to share all of this information and knowledge with you, and see you soon.